Hey guys, today, very important video, so stay tuned. Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Now today, we're talking about trees. Wow. So, let's get started with a bit of a verse that kind of gives a Christian preface to what we're going to dive into, and then we're going to dive right into it. So, before anything, let's just read the Bible. Again, ESV. Let's see if you know. You probably both know the chapter and the verse, so let's test it. Now, we're in the book of Mark. And he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums. And a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." Wow. Now that was Mark chapter 12, verses 41 to 44, the widow's offering. Isn't that powerful? All that she gave versus what the disciples wanted to give. Or not the disciples, but the people who wanted to give. You know, the rich people, large sums. That sounds awesome. And they gave but a portion of their livelihood to God, to Christ, to the church. But this nun, she gave everything to God, to Christ, to church. And you can see the difference in that just by the material worth that they attributed, like the wealthy. Material worth is everything to them, so they only give however much, right? But this lady, the more she gave, the more you get to see her outpouring the Spirit truly with her, because I mean, as you can tell, all she had to live on, and then if she gave all that, then all she's living on is Christ. And how beautiful is that? Not of the world, not of the material things, you know, the worth that the wealthy people obviously have because they're wealthy, but of the worth to God, worth to not of herself, but of God. You know, she is below and he is above, and she recognized that and tithes accordingly. And how did she tithe? She tithed everything. 2 copper coins, a penny, right? I mean, what does that actually contribute to the church? I mean, materially, nothing. Like, if material worth was all the church cared about, we'd have the 15th, 16th century happen all over again, right? Where people have to pay for their repentance, like the Catholic Church, right? And the history that comes with that material wealth, that material perspective. But then again, why is God saying, no, well, frick you, this didn't help the church at all? But rather, he says that this is more abundant than all else that was given. Because the church of, God, the church of God, right? The fellowship that they had was not built on materialism, wasn't built on a church that we think is a place, but it was built in the church of Christ, like the Catholic Church with lowercase c, the universal church, right? Where to go out and make disciples across all the nations. And, this person gave her all to God. And that's pretty self-sacrificial, where you need money in this world. That's how we go about. And regardless of the efficacy that this money provided, it is her giving her life in one way or another. She's a nun, so obviously she's given her devotion to him, and now her materialism to him, and all else will be reaped therefore. And isn't that just amazing? And from that, we can assume that Jesus, doesn't already like that there has to be poverty, of course, because again, he foretells in the next chapter the destruction of the temple that she's given money to. So, you can talk about that forever, but the main part of this video is talking about a tree, and it is called The Giving Tree. It's a book by Shel Silverstein, who you might know as a famous children's book author, or a singer, or a raunchy writer, or a very eccentric man who, was just out there. He very honest man. And, it's my favorite book, is The Giving Tree, is what it's called. And my favorite book used to be The Little Prince. That was for the longest time, because I would just read it so many times when I was younger, because I had nothing else to do, no phone, no nothing. So I would just read The Little Prince. It's the only book I really had to read, and I loved it. It's a really good book, because it encourages discovery, imagination, wonder, and we've talked about that before. But The Giving Tree is something so applicable to life and to people and relationships. We're social creatures, and just last video we talked about, we're going to talk about for St. Francis of Assisi's next video. And I thought so, but then it got put on my heart where we could talk about him after this, because I mentioned there's certain biases we have in life. There's the optimist, the pessimist, the realist, and then we have those who are selfish and selfless. And we'll cover all 5 of those biases in just a short little bit here, where we're going to read to you The Giving Tree and really analyze at its core why this children's book is one of the greatest tragedies ever written. And so you'll see how the Bible verse connects. And I have it on my phone, and I'll put it on the screen so you don't be like me just reading to you like it's a poem is pretty much what it is. So anyways, I wish I had it in person that I could read it, but I don't know what happened to mine. I'll have to buy a new one. Now, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Once there was a tree, and she loved a little boy. And every day the boy would come, and he would gather her leaves and make them into crowns and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk and swing from her branches and eat apples. And they would play hide and go seek. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very much. And the tree was happy. But time went by, and the boy grew older. And the tree was often alone. Then one day, the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, come and climb up my trunk and swing from my branches, and eat apples and play in my shade and be happy." "I'm too big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "Well, I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I have only leaves and apples. Take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money and you will be happy." And so the boy climbed the tree and gathered her apples and carried them away. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy. And she said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and be happy." "I'm too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife and I want children, and so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" "I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house, but you may cut off my branches and build a house. Then you will be happy." And so the boy cut off her branches and carried them away to build his house. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time. And when he came back, the tree was so happy she could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she whispered. "Come and play." "I'm too old and sad to play," said the boy. "I want a boat that will take me far away from you. Can you give me a boat?" "Cut down my trunk and make a boat," said the tree. "Then you can sail away and be happy." And so the boy cut down her trunk and made a boat and sailed away. And the tree was happy, but not really. And after a long time, the boy came back again. "I am sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give you. My apples are all gone. My teeth are too weak to eat apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I'm too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You cannot climb." "I'm too tired to climb," said the boy. "I'm sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I am just an old stump. I am sorry." "I do not need very much now," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I am very tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could. "Well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down. Sit down and rest." And the boy did. And the tree was happy. The end. Now, that's a hard hitter. If you're a child reading that book, it probably seems pretty simple. It's like, wow, the tree was such a nice freaking tree. Like, I wish I was a tree like that. And just gave the boy everything. This boy, whatever he wanted, she gave. Huh. Amazing. And then you grow a little older, maybe you're, I don't know, in your 15s, 16, and you're like, frick, I wish I was that boy. I wish somebody would give me all that I wanted. I wish I was the boy who could just take and not have to give. I wish I was that boy who could easily have an easy time, And the tree made it an easy time. And then you grow a little older and you think, maybe you're in your 20s now or wherever you are, you're like, wow, that tree sucked. She just gave everything to that boy, and that boy hardly knew how to live. We don't know if he had a family or not. We don't know if that house was built. We don't know what the boat was, why he came back, and why he always came back. But perhaps he was too dependent on the tree, and she could no longer offer anything, and therefore the boy was in doubt, was lost, and had to come back. And you get a little older and you're like, wow, that boy sucked. He didn't give anything to that tree. If he wants to reproduce just like, the forest would, and as we do, why didn't he take those apples, instead of selling them, reproduce with the forest and use the seeds to sprout up a whole house for that tree? But rather, all the boy did was take, and all the tree did was give. The giving tree. A boy is a terrible person, right? And at that point, you could say older and older, but you get the point where your perspective changes as you go through life. The more people you meet, the more relationships you have, the more places you find yourself in, the environments that shape you, that may surround you, and you're like, I wonder. And when I first read that, I was probably very young and didn't even know what to think. It was just like a stupid story, I thought. And then older now, I'm like, holy, what a beautiful story, a tragedy, truly. Where in the end there, you saw that the tree was cut down. It gave and gave and gave everything. It gave its all, that tree, And at the end of the story, all that was left of her and her identity is a stump, no longer a tree, but one, just an image long forgotten, and only by the boy that she remembered. And I think the hearts in the story are very important, because at the start, the boy's young and he writes me plus T, which is tree, and then he writes, when he gets older, me plus YO, which I think is young love, and he cuts away only that heart, and he does away with, he takes what originally gave to him, took the tree, took the bark, took whatever he needed for the boat, and sailed away. And you can interpret that, however you want. Maybe it was just artistic choice, or the fact that the tree very much contributed to that, or took away that, or whatever you have it. Whether it's that tree's young love was taken away, and therefore lost its heart, or they serve as constant reminders of childhood, and that they're always still there. But I think it's nice that in the end, the heart that remains is of him and the tree. And you could say it is a bit of a happy ending where they're reunited and the heart still remains there. But it is a sad one where the tree is no longer, it's just, again, like a facade of, what was once a tall tree. We never saw the exact size of it, but it was a mighty tree, very tall. You could plane its branches. It's an apple tree. And I think the most telling page on that book is, and the tree was happy, but not really, and I think that's kind of a self-discovery moment where the tree is like, wow, what just happened to me? I no longer bear fruit. I can't bear fruit to anyone else. I've lost that ability. And the tree trunk is only roots. And sure, it might grow back eventually, but as we know, a tree stump rarely does, and no other tree around it looks like that, right? It's in a forest. It might be the only one that's a trunk. Now it's lost its identity, it's lost its house, it's lost its fruit, and all of that kind of plays back into the Bible. Imagine losing your house, the house of God. Imagine losing the fruit that you can bear because of God. Imagine losing that. Imagine losing the people around you, that fellowship. Imagine losing the identity in Christ, the communion, the sanctity of that, and losing it because of this or that. And in this story, it is because of a relationship. It's because of a person taking away that, taking away all of that. And I think back and I'm like, you could see, you know, the tree as the optimist, right? We talked about in the last video. And the boy as more of a pessimist, just taking and not giving. And you could see the tree as selfless and the boy as selfish, therefore. And you could see the realist being the narrator. You know, maybe the tree was happy, but it's always in the past tense, was happy. You know, when the boy was around, it should be is happy, but it always was happy. And the narrator is the only one who's, again, providing an unbiased approach, right? The kind of realist, even though I guess that is a sort of bias. But seeing the perspective of the narrator, and we're just seeing it from third person, we're not really sure how the boy feels or what goes on in his life. We're more focused on the tree, because again, that's what it's about, the giving tree. And I like to think, like, how often in life do we waste our time in relationships, waste our time with people who only take, you know? And just like in the last video where we talked about peace and to have your energy, your spiritual energy renewed by another person, because of course it's good, you know, Christianity is in essence a self-sacrificial, I mean, at its core is self-sacrificial. And therefore we have to be built up by those around us. So that's why we're social creatures. That's why we have love. That's why it's written on our heart. That's why we're to find our other half and, you know, go towards Christ, become one again, and reproduce, make fruit, right? And physically and or, you know, metaphorically. And in that, I like to think, wow, should we be neither the tree nor the boy, but rather maybe the narrator in the story, where we can see and discern perhaps the tree wasn't happy, not really, you know, and perhaps the boy, you know, just truly, he just can't use that tree for what he saw its worth as, and took what he could. He took everything from it, what he could. And in that realization, I don't think we want to be like the tree. I don't think we want to lose everything. I don't want to lose the fruit I bear, the identity I have, the people around me. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to be just what I am at its roots and just an open stump. That's losing the ability to do anything that a tree can do. Like a tree's, you know, with photosynthesization, right? They can recycle carbon dioxide into oxygen and give us. Truly, they give, and we give, and that's a very healthy cycle, photosynthesis, right? And in that cycle, that's natural, right? And the things that we make unnatural, the things we kind of force. And if we force ourselves into a depleting relationship, one that just depletes us fully, that's terrible. But then say we're the boy, and we take from something. How easy it is just to take and take. Imagine you meet just the nicest girl, the nicest guy, or whatever, and you're like, wow, I can just take from them, and they seem happy. Well, that's both bad for them and bad for me, right? I'm just taking and taking. I'm not seeing the negatives of that, the consequences, because the other person doesn't. They just keep giving. And therefore, I'm just going to keep taking. I don't see any consequences to doing that. And therefore, it teaches me a certain thing, a certain path that is not the right one. Because the right path, according to Christianity, is one where we love ourselves and love our neighbor. Love our neighbor just as we love ourselves, right? We put that verse in the last video, and it's very true in the chapter of John there. And I think that if we were truly to love others as we love ourselves, we would, in the same way we love ourselves, the way we love God, right? Self-respect, boundaries. We therefore need to find, again, this line to, and it's not a line to balance, it's a line that surrounds us, lines that we can see. Does somebody cross it? And therefore we can just gently tell them, you've crossed the line, you know? If we don't have any of those lines, we become the tree, right? And if we make those lines walls, we could become the boy, right? And we just want to take and take and take and never give and just hide behind these walls. So rather than making big walls or eliminating the lines completely, just draw them on the ground and see who respects them. Other people can see those lines because you really clearly enunciated them, and see if you can cross over those lines. See which people you tolerate doing that, and see which people you can't tolerate. And therefore those lines will become bolder and bolder and be like, I can't tolerate anyone crossing those lines, you know? Like maybe you can tolerate people crossing maybe a physical boundary, physical line, and that's accepting others, or because of trauma or whatever, those lines may be a little bit taller, a bit of a wall, and just to break them down and make them into a line through help, through God, and just give it all to Him. And you'll see that the importance of this is that we don't become the tree, and in essence, the tree is dead, or become the boy, which is also, he's very old and hasn't really contributed much to the story at all, except taking all the only thing we see. And we don't know if the boy is happy. All we see is he's taking and taking. And one of the saddest things is all the apples are everywhere in that one page. And all of the apples, I mean, they're sparse, how beautiful each of those apples is. And where does that come from? The tree. And where does the tree come from? Like God. And the boy just took each of those apples and sold them monetary value. Now that goes back into Mark chapter 12 that we just read. And the boy would be considered the wealthy one. And he might, who knows where the money went to, whether it's to a good cause, to a family, we don't know. But regardless, he is wealthy because of something and hasn't contributed anything really. We don't know, but anything to the original source, which let's say the tree is God in the story. And really the tree, it really kind of symbolizes what Jesus did for us, to always give. He didn't really need to take because he's God, but then again that's putting him in a box that we can't. So I just wanted to just think of the tree as God, but he's not. And then this tree, he gives these fruits, but who gives back to the tree is the one who truly is abundant and has given more and will live with him. And that's who the nun is. The nun is the one who gives back to the tree, and not the boy taking those fruits and just wasting away, right? So really, the Giving Tree is just such a beautiful story of a tragedy that one boy, perhaps misunderstanding because of what he was taught, just to take and take, or because of his heart, and it wasn't in the right place, and therefore he only took and never thought of giving. Maybe he has trauma or whatever. And it really calls upon the question of accountability and responsibility. Again, the video is all on that topic just because of how important they are. If the boy was accountable and responsible, sure, he'd probably give back to the tree, all that she has given him, and therefore it'd be a healthy cycle. But he didn't, and the tree just kept giving, and then boom, that's what happened. But I think we'll end the video there. This one is probably the longest video, just because of how, this is a video, this is a topic central to relationships, and therefore central to God, right? Central to our relationship to God, and defining, discerning, and if we're creating a world that is better as we are lights shining through by God who shines through us, right? Therefore we have to cultivate, and as we cultivate that light, and the spiritual energy that we gain, that we can't just keep giving, without receiving. And as much as I wish I could say, like, I want to be that tree, parenthood, let's be that tree for our child, right? He's young, he doesn't want to deal with the complications of the world, but rather let us be the one who can give but can also receive. He can receive, or she can receive, and knowing that you can receive, if you don't, take back your peace and give it to a place that is truly resonant with God, and therefore resonant with that energy given. It harmonizes, right? And you become what is called just a healthy relationship. And that, what makes it healthy is that both people, or whatever else, to an environment, to a substance, to anything, any healthy sort of relationship, not just personal, but interpersonal as well, has to have that cultivation, has to have that harmony, has to have a certain give and take. Not a push and pull, but a give and take. Where, the famous quote in relationships is, as your partner tries to do 60% and imagines maybe the other person doing 40%, the other person shouldn't do 60%, imagining the other person do 40%, It's that kind of balance that harmonizes, right? That's why we say maybe the missing half, or we say this or that about ourselves, relationship to ourselves. And in that, we can be energized and not exhausted, right? Burning out, caretakers, burnout is a very real thing because it's their job to give, and they rarely take. And a part of that is seeing that these patients they could give, but it's just they're in such a state that they need to be given. And just putting it in a simple give and take is pretty black and white. When you take the nuance of the caretaker or the nuance of Jesus, right? There's always nuance to it, but you can really realize this dynamic in life and when it's lacking or when it's prospering, right? And that's why we're in the book of Matthew chapter 10, prospering, chapter 9, compassion. And we'll continue that with Francis of Assisi's next episode. It's specifically talking about compassion. And again, just kind of following this natural trend that's the story of life developing, where I'm just teaching you guys things that I wish I would have known when I was going through certain hardships or trials. And it would have made it 10 times easier, because then I'd have the self-respect, I'd have the knowledge, I'd have the boundaries, I'd have the wisdom to navigate them properly and not end up hurting myself and perhaps others in the way, in the stones that I cross, in the jagged and the tall and the short, in the oceans, in the fire, whatever it might be. It's one has to exist, right? We have it's gonna sound bad, but you kind of have to hurt people. You always hurt the person you love one way or another because you love them, right? And in that love, you just express yourself fully, right? It's that gate opening. And there's always nuance, of course, but yeah, my experience, I was definitely hurt, and I've been told I didn't hurt, and I can reconcile that with myself. But how can you reconcile things with yourself? How can you reconcile certain experiences? I suppose it doesn't matter, because it's all in God's plan, whether or not you do. But it does help the emotional side when the logical side is intact, right? So anyways, that's it for today, but here's to tomorrow. Bye-bye.